Almost exactly 2 years ago is when I saw Jean Dawson on his Chaos Now tour. And it was honestly, I think, one of my best concert experiences of all time. It really kind of unveiled this idea of like concerts being like a very social thing for me. When I went there by myself. I saw him by myself. And I was the second person I was the third person in line. And then I talked to the two guys in front of me for like basically 3-4 hours, whatever, waiting for the concert to start. And that was a really crazy thing for me because at the time I was very antisocial and very like socially isolated, but that like opened up that whole world for me. Like, oh, concerts is a place you can talk to people and find people like you. And I used to just see it as like an entertainment experience, but then that's when I began to see it as, oh, this is also like a social thing and also like a community of sorts almost. And now it's 2 years later and I'm seeing him again live in Toronto for his new album, Glimmer of God. And I'm really excited. The Quadeca's opening, and Quadeca is also an artist I really, really like. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about his new album, as in Jean Dawson's new album, Glimmer of God. The rollout for this album felt very lacking, especially compared to Chaos Now, where he had all these little videos recorded and all these music videos. But for Glimmer of God, I feel like I don't even think he had a single music video. There's barely any promo. He just put out a few singles, and like he didn't really make it clear that he was putting out an album. I feel like it was kind of just a very lacking rollout. And like I'm a big, long-time fan of Jean Dawson. I've been a big fan since Pixel Bath, and I wasn't really aware that this album was coming out. Like he announced it and I forgot that he announced it. And then the only reason I saw is because it was on like my Spotify. Like when you first open it, you see it. And I saw it there. It's like, oh yeah, Jean Dawson released an album. And it didn't really get me that excited for what it was. And I was kind of like, oh, is this going to be a lackluster album? Because he had a lackluster rollout, but that's really not the case. It seems like he focused all his time and effort into the music rather than any sort of presentation of the music via a rollout, because this is by far his most ambitious project yet. Like, there is just some absolutely out of this world sounds on here. Like, Slow Heavy Ecstasy is absolutely unbelievable. When I was first listening to this track, I was down at the water, down at the lake, and I was walking down the seashore. I have a video of it, and this song was playing. I'm like, fuck, this is so good. This is so good. The way those synths fill your ears, and then those, I think, kicks, or I don't know, the bass, the heavy shit that is going in there is so satisfying. And I love that track. I love Slow Heavy Ecstasy. Sorry if my thing keeps focusing in and out. I gotta figure that out soon. But yeah, unbelievable track. And then to get into like properly actually reviewing the album, I want to begin with the opening track, which is Darlin. And I'd worried he was going to be jumping into this Dijon and like McGee sound with this kind of like slow R&B thing going. And luckily, that's not the case. It's one of his most versatile albums to date. And it's not even like I dislike Darlin. I think it's a fantastic track, maybe even one of the best on the album. But I just didn't want a whole album of that because it feels almost like dishonest and like kind of like copying, because it's like it was a pretty similar sound, and it would just, I feel like, be boring to have a whole album that's just basically Dijon, but it's Jean Dawson, or McGee, like, but it's Jean Dawson. Because I don't know, I feel like that sound has gotten very popular recently, and I don't really look for more of it besides from Dijon and McGee, because they are the ones who innovated and actually created this and are doing interesting things with it. But Darlin's a good track. I just don't want a whole album of Darlin. So on this album, with all this versatility, he distances himself from his rock-centered past, at least for his last two albums, Pixel Bath and Chaos Now. Especially Chaos Now is very much an alternative rock, pop rock album. But on here, he goes much more into pop music in various different lanes. He has some synth pop on here with Houston. And that is a track, the single I heard it, I was like, but I hear it now, and Though sonically it's nothing very interesting, I feel like the writing really pulls through and it's a catchy hook. So that definitely saves the track for me and I can still really enjoy it. There's also quite a few piano bass tracks that are also pop tracks on here. Like there's Die For Me with Lil Yachty, and then there's also Boy and The Swan, I think it's called. The Boy and The Swan, yes. And the Lil Yachty feature, I think it's pretty cool. He like starts off with this spoken word thing, he goes in this cool flow and whatever. And the instrumental is very much something I could hear him on, similar to something like the James Blake collab he did or whatever. Like, I don't know, his recent stuff kind of sounds reminiscent of what Jean Dawson is doing on here, especially when looking at his James Blake collab. I see a lot of parallels there, so it makes sense for him to be here. I can't say the same for the Bones collaboration, as this feature is just such a nothing sandwich, as they say, where it's really just like, it didn't even really cross my mind that Bones was on here. I was just like, wow, this is just a verse that is happening, and it's just like not anything at all. It very much lacks in substance, and I don't feel like he brings anything to the track. I would have very much preferred him just to not be there because it just doesn't really make sense to me at all. Anyways, along with all these new sounds and interesting, cool stuff Gene has, on Glimmer of God, there's also this, like, very clear step up in production quality and mixing that gives it this new kind of glossy feel that feels a lot more professional and not to an overproduced extent where it's just, like, kind of feels uninspired and very poppy and mainstream, but more, it's just more polished and more put together, which I think comes with shifting from a rock sound, which can be more rough, and then going to pop, which is a lot more orchestrated generally. So yeah, I appreciate that on some level, because it makes some tracks really sound so nice in your headphones. And then to wrap up this, I'm too close. To wrap up this review, I just want to say that I've been following Gene since Pixel Bath, and this is clearly a big... I was literally saying this 2 seconds ago, but this is a big step up for him in many aspects. I see him developing these new sounds. He's really trying new things as an artist, and it's working, and I can really appreciate that. And additionally, I really hope this album gets the recognition it deserves despite the lacking rollout, as I feel like he really put his heart and soul into this album, and the writing is so much better, and it's produced so much better, and it's his longest record to date, but it feels like it feels not dragged out at all. He knows how to do a longer project, and he's really doing shit on here that I feel like deserves some appreciation. And though I know he kind of didn't do shit for the rollout, I think the album still really deserves to get some plays, and I hope people come and see him on his tour. I'm going to be at the Toronto show. I think Gene has had one of the best album runs of the 2020s. I think you could also put Quadeca up there, who's opening for him, or Underscores or Jane Remover, but I feel like he's definitely up there in one of the best runs of this current decade. And I think he'll only maintain that from, like, I think all these artists that I love so much and I think are so amazing are still so earlier in their career, and I feel like they can have just blossom and keep going and putting out this great stuff in a Bjork-like fashion where you just don't really miss. And I really hope to see that happen for Gene and many other artists I like, because since Pixel Bath, he's really been doing his shit. That's all, Sam Nation. Follow me on Twitter. Subscribe to my main channel. See you next Wednesday at 6 p.m.